At my high school, like many, the theater program is a bit neglected. We have a 300-seat house for a 2,000-kid school. Usually the same group of students are cast, and often the shows our director chooses are short and simple. Sometimes, though, this works like magic. When all of us thespians heard that the fall play was a newer show called Elephant's Graveyard, we didn't know what to think. When we found out that the show was almost entirely storytelling and monologues, some of us were disappointed. This wasn't acting, it was reciting. I tried my hardest at auditions, fairly certain I wouldn't be cast. There was no ensemble in the show, and despite playing many roles I was very proud of getting in community theater, I'd never been more than ensemble at school. During my Theater 3 class, my teacher, the director of the show, informed me and the other student in the class that we would both be cast. I'd never been so excited. Checking the cast list, I found out I was given the role of engineer. I knew nothing about the character, beyond the monologue I'd read for auditions. It was not the part I wanted, but I was happy to be part of the show, especially after our director informed us that we were going to submit our show for review to be a part of the Illinois High School Theater Fest. If we were good enough, we could perform at the University of Illinois for students and teachers from all around the state. Having seen some of the amazing shows that played at Theater Fest in years past, it was kind of a big deal for us. Once we began rehearsals, it became clear that the recitation of a story was not going to be what we expected. We worked hard on characterization, learning and creating our characters' backstories, their favorite things, their relationships, and their fears. We became connected to our characters in an indescribable way. Despite the show seeming passive, the emotional tension created interest. The true story follows the Spark Circus on their 1916 route to the tiny town of Irwin, Tennessee, a veritable village that, as my eerily arrogant character states, would be nothing without the railroad and rail yard it housed. The show begins with each character describing the hope and excitement they feel as the circus arrives in town and sets up. This all turns upside down when, during the circus parade, the biggest elephant throws her new rider from her back and accidentally crushes his head. The town and circus members are both horrified, but the show must go on. That night at the circus performance, the townspeople are enraged and decide they wish to kill the elephant. The railroad engineer, oddly calm throughout the show, decides to hang the elephant with the crane in the rail yard. The townspeople agree. The final segment of the show is the description of the hanging of the elephant by each character. Over half the actors actually cried during every show. So did a good number of people in the audience. Every character changed greatly from the beginning of the show to the end. At the end of the show, the characters leave the stage one by one. As each person came backstage, we'd all hold hands in a chain, shaking, crying, and smiling about how powerful the show was to us. After bowing, we'd run off stage, hugging and laughing, more proud than ever before. After our second show, our director was approached by an older couple in the audience. They were the playwright's parents, sharing that they'd seen many productions of the show since its publication, and that ours was one of the absolute best. Swelling with pride, we performed what might be our last show for the Theater Fest Review Committee. Afterward, we had a short talk back with them, and then we had to wait a month and a half to see if we were chosen. Upon finding out we were, we immediately became ridiculously excited. We began rehearsing again a few weeks before the fest. All the cast members and selected crew members had to pack up a truck, much like the traveling circus in the show, and head to the tiny town of Champaign-Urbana to perform again. We were performing in the main auditorium, with seating for 2,500, a balcony and a stage 3 times the size of ours on the final day, 2 back-to-back shows at 10 a.m. and noon of this emotionally exhausting play. The first 2 days of the fest were nerve-wracking but fun. On our performance day, we woke up at 5:30 in the morning to put together our set and rehearse one final time. The cast of the show rarely does much construction, but on that early Saturday morning, we tried our hands at screw guns and heavy lifting. The set was up in an hour, and we were ready. After singing our final Our Father, we shuffled backstage to perform to a bigger audience than most of us had ever been in front of. The 2 back-to-back shows were electric. I felt my character's emotion in person coming out my toes. The shows we performed that day were fantastic. We were going in knowing our show was good. The confidence worked wonders, as did the clearly intrigued and excited audience. Performing for people's sleepy but supportive grandparents has no comparison to giving your show to a group of theater enthusiasts running on that sweet spot of sleep where you've had so little that everything is in perfect focus and 10 times more emotional. Different people can make the same thing so much better, and the right people, like the people I could performed with, can make something perfect.